It's Levi Brackman here with Truth, Jewish Wisdom for today. Thank you so much for joining. This is the Torah Portion Uncensored part of this podcast. If you like this podcast, please leave a review or like it wherever you see the podcast, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on Apple Podcasts, whether it's on Spotify, anywhere else. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's jump right in and talk about the Torah portion at hand, Bahalotcha, found in Numbers Bamidbar, and we're going to talk Perek Yud Aleph, which is chapter 11. And it starts off very dramatically with Vayhi ha'am k'mis'oinim rab oznei Hashem vayishma Hashem v'yicher apoi v'tivar bom eish Hashem v'toichal b'ktzei ha'machne. And the people were complainers, bad, evil, in the ears of the Lord, and God heard it and he got very angry, and a fire of the God burned among them, and it devoured b'ktzei ha'machne, in the edges of the encampment. So what was going on here? Well, there was some kind of complaints that the people had against God. There's a discussion about what the complaints were. According to the Rashbam and the Ramban, the Nachmanides, they have different views. Maybe it's because they were having to walk too much or march too much in the desert. Maybe it was because they were uncomfortable. They were not grateful for all the miracles that God was giving them. They were having the manna and other types of things. Other people think that this was actually because they didn't have water, and it relates to the story where the Israelites didn't have water, which was told in Exodus and Shmois. The commentators think this was a new complaining that took place, and the Israelites were being ungrateful to God, and therefore God punished them immediately. They cried out to Moses, and Moses, Vayispael Moshe al Hashem, Vatishka ha'esh, and Moses prayed to the Lord, and the fire abated. And therefore they called this place Tav'era. Why? Because Varavam Eish Hashem, because the fire of the Lord burnt among them there. So then the next story happens. V'ha'asafsuf asher b'kirboy his'avo tavo, and the asafsuf. And the asafsuf could mean like the Riffraff or the mixed multitudes amongst them. That was the Erev, the people who weren't Israelites but still came up from Egypt with the Israelites. They had a desire, had a lust. They lusted meat. Vayashuvu vayivku gam B'nei Yisrael. And the children of Israel also cried together with this asafsuf, together with this Erev, with this mixed multitudes, with the Riffraff. And they said, Mi yachilenu basa, who shall give us flesh to eat? Who shall give us meat to eat? And they cried they didn't have enough meat. And again, God gets very upset with them. Eventually they get meat, they get the quail, etc. But what's interesting here, and what I want to focus on, is that in the very beginning of this chapter, it says, Vayihi ha'am k'mis'oinanim. And it was the people who are complainers. It doesn't say the people of Israel. If you look at a similar story that took place in Exodus and Shmois, Perek Tezayin Pasuk Beis, chapter 16, verse 2, it says, Vayiloinu kol hadas B'nei Yisrael Moshe v'Aaron b'midbar, and all the congregation of the children of Israel complained on Moses and Aaron in the desert. Vayomer aleim B'nei Yisrael, and the children of Israel said to Moses and Aaron, Mi yitain Moseinu b'yad Hashem be'eretz Mitzrayim b'shivteinu al sir abosa b'achleinu lechem lasoiva ki hoitzeisem oisono el hamidbar hazeh l'homes es kol hakol hazeh barav. And the children of Israel said to Moses and Aaron, would that we had died by the hand of God in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots, when we did eat bread to the fullest. For you have brought us forth into the midbar, into the wilderness, to kill this whole assembly by hunger. In other words, it would have been better had we been full and eaten meat and bread and died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, rather than coming out into this desert and died by hunger. And what was the result? The result was God gave them the manna, and God gave them meat. In this case, in Bahalotcha, in Numbers, similar kind of story happened. They complained to God. Well, they did have some food in that case. They had the manna, but they weren't happy with the manna. They wanted actual food to eat, and they complained to God. And God got angry with them, and he punished them. Although in the end, he did give them also the quail to eat, but he was angry with them. In Exodus, he wasn't angry with them. In Exodus, they are called Adas B'nei Yisrael, the congregation of the children of Israel. In Numbers, they're just called Ha'am, the people, not Ha'am B'nei Yisrael. So what's the differences here? According to the Bible critics, they say this means that there's another author here. That this part in Bahalotcha, this chapter 11 in Numbers, is a different author than the author which is found in Exodus. And be that as it may, that's what they say. I'm not going to get into that argument whether it is or whether it isn't. But what I see here is the reason, in my view, why they're called Ha'am, the people, and not the particular of Ha'am B'nei Yisrael or Adas B'nei Yisrael, the congregation of the children of Israel, in Numbers, is because that's how they saw themselves. If you look at the text, it's actually kind of a strange text, because it introduces the text that they were complainers, bad in the ears of God, and God heard them and got angry with them. And it doesn't tell us what actually happened there, why they were angry, and why they were upset, and why they were complaining, what they were actually complaining about. But then the next story, it tells us, V'asav suf asher b'kirboy, and this mixed multitudes, or the riffraff that was with them, that weren't part of the children of Israel, they seem to be the ones who were complaining. From the continuation of it, it seems that in both cases, this wasn't just the children of Israel complaining, but it was also the mixed multitudes that were complaining as well. And then the Israelites also complained and cried as well, and they said, we also want meat. So they went along with them. In other words, the children of Israel didn't see themselves as distinct and different from anybody else. They're just the people. It's a universal people. We're not different than anybody else. Whereas in the case of Exodus, they seem to see themselves as distinct. This was the Adas B'nei Yisrael, the congregation of the children of Israel, who were complaining. And they were complaining why in the story in Exodus? Because they didn't want to die. It makes sense. They don't want to die, so give us some food, please. They didn't even have the manna back then, by the way. So they didn't have food. It seemed to be a reasonable complaint. Whereas in Numbers, in Bamidbar, the story is slightly different. They just had a taiva. They had a desire, they had a lust for meat. They had food. They had the manna. Yes, it wasn't perhaps ideal, but they had it. It was available. They just wanted extra food. They wanted meat. And it was a lustful thing rather than for basic sustenance, which they would need, because if they didn't have it, they would die. It seems to me that there's an indication here of a universal view of oneself versus a particular view of oneself. Now, especially today, in today's day and age, where a lot of people are vociferous against the particular view of the individual. They consider when you see yourself as a group separate from everyone else, that is ethnocentric or is very tribal. And as a matter of fact, someone commented to me this week that they feel that tribalism and this ethnocentricity is the root of all evil, and one has to see oneself not as a part of a group, but as part of the whole of humanity, and this very universal view. And as a matter of fact, the Torah has that as well. In Bereshis, it says God created man in his image. All man was created in God's image. In that sense, all humans have this universal connection because we were all created in God's image. And we've got this family of humanity where we're all connected. We all cry the same tears. We all have the same desires. Just like the Erev Rav, the mixed multitudes, they have a desire for meat. So the Israelites have a desire for meat. We have that in common. So we have to understand that there is this kind of universal connection amongst humanity. But if that overrides everything, so you don't see the particular, you don't see that you are part of a particular group, of a Adas B'nei Yisrael, of a congregation of the children of Israel, that's when things start to break down. Now, I have this book, which was given to me by Yehuda Be'ezerkin, who was with me a couple of weeks ago. We did a podcast episode together. It's called Judaism Straight Up by Moshe Koppel. And it's very, very, very interesting book, and I highly recommend it. And I appreciate Yehuda Be'er for giving it to me and therefore bringing it to my attention. He talks in this book about the difference between the universal viewpoint and the particular viewpoint. And he talks about the need to be able to balance these two together. If you just have a universal viewpoint where you say, actually, there are no differences amongst people, and fairness is the most important thing, and everyone needs to be equal and be seen as the same, then you lack something and lose something very important. And he shows through a illustration of game theory that you're not motivated to do the right thing if you don't have some kind of allegiance and loyalty to a group. In other words, allegiance and a loyalty to a particular group and a particular identity is actually what breeds the ability to be moral. If you don't, you will lack and lose the ability for all fairness. If everything is all the same, then you really don't have anything. If there are no distinctions between people at all, everyone's equal, everyone is all the same, then you don't have the ability to distinguish between one thing and another. And if you don't have the ability to distinguish between one thing and another, then everything is always equal. And therefore you really have nothing. Let me try and give a practical example of this. If all ideas are equal, and there aren't any better ideas or worse ideas, for example, then there's no way of gaining knowledge. If truth is not truth, because all sources of knowledge are equal, then there are no sources of knowledge. If all people are the same, then you can't have a prime minister, you can't have a president. Why should he be president and me not be president? So all structures of society fall apart. If everyone's equal, why should one person have more money and less money? Everyone should have the same money. And therefore, no one's going to work hard because everyone gets the same amount of money no matter what they do. And therefore, you don't have any productivity in society. So the idea here is that when you take away any ability to have differentiations between things, you end up with nothing. So when the B'nei Yisrael, when the children of Israel stop seeing themselves as a unique nation, separate from others, which is what the Torah tries to do, tries to tell them, you have a particular purpose. You Israelites, you are being taken, Kadoshim Tir, you are holy, Ki Kadashani, because I am holy. You are a Mamlachas Gainim V'Gai Kadosh, you are a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. You have a particular purpose in the world which is different than others. When you have that, then you can have morality. Then you have the ability to be able to see the distinctions and therefore have this kind of morality and understand, I care for my people, I can also care for other people. But it starts off, as this dictum of Judaism says, that charity starts at home. The poor people of your own city, you need to take care of them before you take care of the poor people of the other city. Because there is such a thing as these people are more important to me. And when you understand charity in that way, now you can start projecting the charity outside as well. So it is really important for these people, the children of Israel, to see themselves as a distinct group with a distinct mission. And when they do that, then they're able to say, I'm going to withstand certain types of pain because I'm on a mission to do something. It's when they stop seeing themselves as a distinct people and they start accepting this universal view of humanity, that's when they say, why should I accept this discomfort? Why shouldn't I have meat? I want meat. I'm a human, I want meat. I should be able to have meat. I'm not going to give up anything in order to be able to have loyalty to my people to go along this mission. This mission is no longer important to me. It's that universal thing. You can't see importance as a mission for an individual mission if you have this total universalist mindset. It only becomes important if you buy into the particular, that you are part of Adas B'nei Yisrael, the congregation of the children of Israel. But if you just see yourself as Ha'am, just the people, and that in common with every other person in humanity, then why should you suffer in any kind of way for this mission of being a holy nation? A Malachas Kainim V'Gai Kadosh. And I think that's what the narrative is trying to tell us here. This is what the pasuk is saying. That it starts off and it says, the people were complainers. As soon as they became people, they weren't Adas B'nei Yisrael. They saw themselves in universal rather than the particular. They weren't going to give up anything for the mission, and therefore everything bothered them. What are we doing here in the desert? It's hard, it's hot, we're marching, and none of it makes sense, and we don't have food. We're the same as the mixed multitudes, we're the same as the Riffraff, we're all the same, we're all complaining. That's what God got upset about. Whereas in Exodus, in the story there, they saw themselves as Adas B'nei Yisrael, the congregation of the children of Israel. And they didn't want to die because they had a mission to fulfill. And if we don't have any food, we're going to die. That was acceptable. But if you're just complaining for the sake of complaining and you don't recognize that you have a mission and that you're willing to give up something for that mission, that's when there's a problem that we have on our hands, and morality isn't there, and it's very difficult to continue as a nation, to continue as a people, continue along this mission, and to have any real success. And I think that is what the text is really saying here. Whether it's a different author or not a different author, will allow the Bible critics to discuss that, but I think when you look at the subtext, maybe is trying to tell us something very important. And today this is a very, very, very important lesson, because we are told, especially by postmodernism and the zeitgeist, that this particularism, this ethnocentricity, this tribalism is negative, is bad. But I actually agree with Moshe Koppel in his book Judaism Straight Up, that if you don't have any particularism, and the Jews have done this really well, we've cared about ourselves and we've been able to be moral towards other people as well. But if you don't have that inner confidence of where you come from and that you are from this particular group, it's going to be very difficult for you to actually live a moral and ethical life in general. And we see that, by the way. We see that today. Why is it, for example, that you have all these postmodern moralizers who don't have any moral clarity, and they basically are supporting Hamas, terrorists who are able to rape women and behead babies and do these terrible things. But these universalists, they have common cause with them. Similar to how the children of Israel, when they saw themselves in the universal, have had common cause with the Eruvav, with the Riffraff. It's very important that one is able to feel proud at being part of a particular group, the morals and ethics that come as part of that, and at the same time caring about other people, but remembering that the poor of your own city come first, because that's where you're from. This has been Levi Brackman with Truths, Jewish Wisdom for Today. Thank you so much for joining, and until next time.